If she shows up.
Good evening. I call the Board of Commissioners for Johnson City on January the 2nd, 2020, our first meeting of the new year to order. This evening, I believe Reverend Locke is not here, so Commissioner Fowler has said he would say our invocation if we would all rise and then face the flag for our pledge.
Let's all bow. Lord, we just come to you and just thank you so much for everything that you do, blessings for us, for this town, for this time that we can spend together. Lord, we ask you to be with us, just lead us and guide us in what we do. Help us do the things that are pleasing to you and things that will benefit the city and the people that we represent. I would just thank you for everything and ask you to bless the rest of this meeting. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Mayor, your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from your meeting held on Thursday, December the 19th.
I'll move approval. Second. Were you there?
You want to
I read them.
Can he make the second, or do we have to have someone who's here?
No, anybody here can.
Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
I was not here, so I will pass there.
Commissioner Hunter?
I watched it on the stream, so yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Next order of business is consideration of the consent agenda.
Commissioners, are there any items you would like to have pulled from the consent agenda?
There are only 2 items on the consent agenda.
Right, well, we could pull them all, you know, who knows? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to pass the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4724-19. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from I-2 heavy industrial district to R4 medium density residential district. Certain property located at 204 Highland Avenue is ready for your consideration on first reading.
Mayor, Commissioners, before you is a request to rezone 204 Highland Avenue from I-2 heavy industrial to R4 medium density residential. The petitioner is Habitat for Humanity and city staff for the purpose of constructing one single-family unit.
Move approval. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other questions regarding this request? Is there any other information you wanted to share with us?
There's not,
Okay.
just that it's compatible with the future land use map and current R4 zoning, and Planning Commission recommended approval.
And it's a significantly less intensive use than I-2.
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Next is ordinance number 4725-19. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from I-2 heavy industrial district to MX1. Certain property located at 202 Highland Avenue is ready for your consideration on first reading.
Will? Thank you.
Yeah, this city-initiated rezoning to rezone this property 202, which of course adjoins 204, which you just heard. from I-2 to MX1. There's no proposed, the city owns this piece of property. There's no proposed development at this time. This was rezoned to I-2 in the early 80s for expansion of Kelly Foods, which is now a parking lot for Founders Park. The city sees this as an opportunity to promote either residential or neighborhood scale sized commercial development. I would also promote these two goals of the Johnson City Comprehensive Plan to promote infill development and encourage concept of mixed use. It is a downzoning from I-2 to MX1. It's near the West Walnut District, so mixed use would be in, would not differ in character from existing zoning. And it would also, for potential commercial development in the future, the MX1 zoning would allow them to make use of shared parking without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals to meet their parking requirements by using the existing Founders Park parking lot. I only included this because the Planning Commission did consider MX1 and R4 zoning at its Planning Commission meeting in December. Both allow for residential development, but you can see there's more commercial possibilities with the MX1. Planning Commission recommended approval from I-2 to MX1 at its December meeting.
Move approval. Second.
This second bullet should not be here to prove the concept. There is no concept plan. There's no
But if we
proposed
zone it MX1, that means something commercial could go right next to a residential house, which is going to be on one side. And is there a resident in the back as well?
There's a duplex. There's some multifamily here. There's residential here. Of course, Habitat for Humanity plans to construct a house here. We saw the MX1 as a good opportunity to promote a neighborhood scale development that would support the neighborhood, which is in line with the future land use plan. So yes, it is possible that there could be commercial development, but it would be small in scale. You can see here these uses are limited to 2,000 square feet of floor area. And the lot's rather small, so they would be limited to the size of development that they could build on that property.
But a daycare center could go in there as well?
It could. It could, or it could be residential. It could be residential, and I think Habitat for Humanity has expressed interest in possibly purchasing that property from the city as well. So.
But if we zoned it MX, we wouldn't be able to control what goes in there as long as it fits the zoning.
That's correct.
While we own it, we can.
Well, yeah, but we wouldn't be developing
True.
that at all. It would be a private person who would buy it from us, and then they could go in and put whatever they want to on mixed use.
If you have a concern there,
Mhm.
you could control the use through your sale of property. You could put restrictions on how the property could be utilized as a condition of the sale of the property beyond the zoning that you place on the property.
And I do, because it's in a residential area, and we don't have anywhere in that area any commercial use.
We only received, for what it's worth, I received 2 calls that were just inquiring about what the rezoning was about. No one expressed any interest. No one showed up at the neighborhood meeting to voice any concerns, nor did they show up at the Planning Commission. We see it as an opportunity to take the rezoning process out of the way for a potential developer that could come in and build something.
And while it is residential to one side, it's Founders Park to the other.
Correct.
And in some respects, that property, as it relates to Founders Park, isn't appreciably different than the old Chevrolet dealership that now houses the Wild Wings Cafe. So, nothing about MX1 says it won't have a residential component, but it does allow some commercial. But I mean, what's the total acreage of that? I mean, what's the size of that lot?
.2 acres.
Yeah, so you're kind of limited in what you're going to do there.
And it very well could be. I think it's a great possibility that it could end up being residential.
There was a lot of conversation about this very thing at the Planning Commission meeting, and considerable conversation. And I think it was ultimately approved mainly because of the flexibility that it offered, and the possibility that if Habitat really wanted it, they could still have the opportunity to purchase it and without a lot of concern.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, are there any other comments? I guess my preference would be that we just keep it R4 as compatible with the neighborhood, that, you know.
And that motion
And
could be
not-
made without going back to Planning Commission because they did deliberate on both of those zonings.
Well, and we
As
wouldn't be
Planning
keeping it R4. We
Or
would-
changing it to
Yeah, I mean,
R4.
Right.
Keeping it with the spirit of the
Right.
property around it. Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor, so.
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise.
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
No. All right.
Next order of business is ordinance number 4726-19, an ordinance to abandon a portion of an alley in the block bound by Wilson Avenue, South Boone Street, West Main Street, and South Commerce Street upon the terms and conditions contained herein, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, ready for your consideration on first reading. This is the alleyway that we've discussed adjacent to First Presbyterian Church that runs down behind their property and our property. Mr. Mitchell.
The city manager has really said it all. As noted here on the map, this is roughly a 210-foot portion of this alley. Do want to note, and it is clarified in the ordinance that has been provided to you, the request is not to abandon the entire alley. It is only to abandon a portion from its terminus here, right up next to the church, back to the back line of Mid-City Grill. That would leave open a portion here off of South Commerce Street, allowing traffic to turn into the parking lot that is both being used today and will be used in the future if and when that gets redeveloped. So the request is just to abandon a portion of it, and it is part and parcel with the requested property swap. Thank you.
Move for approval?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? One quick question, Mr. Peterson, on our sanitation trucks don't go down that alleyway, do they? Do they roll all their cans out on the street?
I can't answer the current situation, but
Okay.
I do know that we've talked about those properties can be serviced through cans on the front. So when that's abandoned, we would have to start picking up on the sidewalk in front of the shops.
Because that's where they sit now, in that alleyway.
We had an internal conversation and do recognize that Mid-City Grill has some rollouts, and that, again, that portion right there adjacent to the restaurant would not be closed, but the other areas could be served directly off the street. The other thing to note in terms of infrastructure or other city services, there are existing utility lines underneath the alley, so please note that in the ordinance, we have requested that a permanent easement be applied that would preserve and protect any and all subsurface utilities.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other comment, questions? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise.
Yes.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Next ordinance is 4722-19, which is a contract for sale or the exchange of real estate along with this alleyway closing. Ordinance 4722-19, an ordinance authorizing a contract for the exchange of real estate with the First Presbyterian Church of Johnson City Incorporated of certain parcels of real property owned by the City of Johnson City and located in the 9th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, upon the terms and conditions contained herein, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, ready for your consideration on second reading.
Commissioners, is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other questions? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes. Mr. Peterson, on the next item, I'm going to have you explain it here in just a minute, but we've had 5 people who've requested to speak, who've submitted formal requests. Normally, that public input is at the end of the meeting. We're going to pull it forward and let you speak before we vote on this on second reading on the retail district. But if you would go over real clearly what we are voting on in our vote tonight on second reading, I would appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. And I think you've got some folks here that, beyond the 5 that sent in the email, that would like to speak as well.
All right.
Mayor. Excuse me. Ordinance 4723-19, an ordinance to designate the boundaries of a regional retail and tourism development district in the city of Johnson City pursuant to the authority granted to the city by House Bill 52, Senate Bill 1434, as enacted in 2019 by the 107th General Assembly, ready for your consideration on second reading. You want to pop up the map,
Yes, sir.
please, sir? What this ordinance does is meet part of the criteria of House Bill 524, which requires that the city commission establish the boundaries of the regional retail and tourism development district by ordinance. So this will have to be approved by you on 3 readings, this being the second reading. What this district does is it makes available state sales tax incentives that come to the city that would then be redistributed to individual developers as per the terms of an agreement to be reached by the developers for property. This area can be no more than 950 acres, and all areas within the region must be within a half mile of an interstate interchange, which this meets that criteria. It must also be within 20 miles of 2 state boundaries. That criteria is also met. The development must generate $2 million a year in state sales taxes. It must generate at least 1 million visitors per year and require an investment of a minimum of $20 million. The types of activities that are eligible for the incentive money would be property acquisition, design, engineering, construction, incentives to tenants. It also allows that money to be used for public roads, sidewalks, trails, parks, a variety of public uses. So again, the incentive money comes to the city, and then there's a separate agreement with the developers that allocates how much of this incentive money is passed along to the developer. It's structured this way so that if the district, creates a need for additional infrastructure, whether it's roads, bridges, water, sewer, whatever it may be, part of that incentive money can be utilized for the construction of those improvements being necessitated by the development of the zone. It's an extremely useful and helpful economic development tool. There are Bristol and Kingsport both have basically the same tool available to them. It's just called the Border Region Retail Zone there, and rather than the Retail and Tourism District here. There's also provisions in this bill that if an existing business is relocated, that the footprint of that business must be increased by no less than 35%. So, as we have talked over the last 9 months about this, I think we all have a real concern about relocating businesses. That doesn't help anybody. All that does is just create problems, and And we want to be very judicious in the agreements that we come to with the developers that do projects here to ensure that it's, good development. It's not relocating something and creating an empty box somewhere else. But all of the local option sales tax generated within this zone stays here. So 25% of all of the local option sales tax generated within this district goes directly to the county school system. 25% of the sales tax generated within this district automatically goes to the city school system. So this is a huge shot in the arm for education funding in Johnson City and Washington County. The other significant criteria here is this has nothing to do with land use, zoning, annexation, anything like that. All this does is establish the boundaries. For a property to be eligible for the incentive, it must be within the city limits of the city of Johnson City. So if somebody is raising cattle and cutting hay and wants to raise cattle and cut hay for the next 100 years, that's fine. There's no pressure for them to do anything, no requirement for those folks to do anything different than what they're doing today. So it's merely an opportunity for folks to develop their property and create some economic activity.
Once this is presented to the state, they certified, is that correct?
They will need to certify the zone, the district, and they will also have to approve, I forgot the words they use, but it's basically a business plan which outlines this is how many square feet are being proposed, this is the gross sales value to be generated or the sales volume per square foot, and they will do some cross-checking with similar size retail and recreation businesses that are already in existence across the state to verify if those are reasonable numbers and projections.
This vote on this ordinance merely decides which 900 and some acres fall into this district per the legislation out of Nashville.
Yes, sir.
And then whether, so like we do with the TIF district downtown, that doesn't mean anybody gets anything yet. Then you still have to come up with a proposal for specific parcels and specific projects. And then that's when we make decisions about whether this tool gets used or not.
Correct.
And comes back to the city, correct? Once the state certifies,
Yeah, because the money's going to flow to us.
then the state's kind of out of it, is that correct? And so we work with the developers who are bringing projects forward.
The remaining involvement by the state will be verification of the amount of sales tax collections on an annual basis. And then there's a time period, I want to say it's like 60, 90 days after the fiscal year is closed out, they send all of the incremental sales tax gain from the base year. So if this is going to be approved in January, then whatever the base sales tax for these properties within the district are in fiscal year 20 will be the baseline. Any incremental growth will be the amount of the incentive.
And my final question, the property that's identified here, it's kind of like a toggle switch. It either meets the criteria or it doesn't. So there's no subjectivity to this at all. It has to be certain distance.
It has to be approved by the state of Tennessee. Whatever they approve is it.
No, but I mean the property that we've identified here. It either falls within that criteria or it doesn't.
Everything within that dashed orange circle falls within the criteria.
So the property that's outside of that circle, that's still identified as yellow coloring,
Because it's all in one property.
it's a part of that property that falls within the circle.
The acreage outside.
I
that's
think
yellow.
I'm hearing your question, but I'm not sure.
Maybe not.
Let me answer it this way. this piece of property right here, this part of it falls within the circle. The state has said that they will consider the entire parcel a part of the 950 acres.
Anything contiguous.
If any part of a parcel meets the criteria, the entire parcel is considered approved for the zone, or the district. Yes, ma'am. Is that your question?
It does.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we will, let me ask, I have 5 people. I'm going to read the names off of the request. Aaron Himes, Lynn, I can't read my own writing. Gavette, thank you. Ben Whitfield, Jody Jones, and Nathan Brand. Are there others who would like to speak? Okay, anyone else? Mark, you want to speak? Anybody? Yes. Okay, Mark Larky. Matt Wilson, okay. Okay, anybody else? Lynn Hodge? Okay, so before I call you up, when we have public input, we allow 3 minutes for you to make your point. If y'all would also try to honor the fact, if someone has made that point right in front of you, try to tell us something else, okay? Just don't, kind of reinforce the same thing. We're all pretty good learners up here, so we'll get it the first time. So we're going to keep you to your 3 minutes. Vice Mayor Wise is our timekeeper as always, and he does a great job of that.
My favorite job.
That we always ask for people to be very respectful. We will listen. If anybody has a question, they'll ask it, but we might not necessarily ask anything, and we'll just listen to your comments tonight. But just remember again, what we're voting on tonight is the approval on second reading for this to move to third reading, and then on to Nashville for approval that this is the designated acreage that qualifies for the criteria that they set in state legislation. Okay? Is it Himes? Yes. Aaron, would you come on up, please? And if you would, for the record, please state your name and address, all of you.
How are you? I'm Aaron Himes. I live at 109 Mayapple Lane. I'll keep this very brief because I know there's some other people who probably have some better comments coming behind me. So as a resident who lives off of Boones Creek Road, I think my concern and the reason that I wanted to approach you guys to speak with you is not knowing of any plan for that particular development. So I recognize that this ordinance is voting on the parameters of the space designated for the development, but I have not heard of any specific plan for the development outside of we're going to zone this and then lots of things can come in. As a resident who lives off of Boones Creek Road, that's kind of concerning because lots of things can come into that development. And we'd like to have more of a formalized plan. Again, I haven't been privy to any public comment or any public meetings about what could be going in there. It's just a lot of information about there being a parcel of land that can be approved where we're going to have some incentives that go back to the city, but not much more than that. So I would ask that the council defers approval of the second reading until we have a better understanding of what exactly the zone is going to consist of.
Mr. Peterson, I think you'd be, well, just to go ahead and address that now, that there are multiple developers who likely will come forward in the fact that the request, we don't know.
The establishment of this district does not guarantee or automatically acknowledge that there will be any development out here. Any development that takes place out here that wants to take advantage of the incentive will have to come back before this body and have an individual agreement with each developer, which will contain the details of what the proposed development will be.
So will there be public meetings prior to that happening to address this with the residents that live out there?
It'll probably just come straight here.
Which is again why I'm in front of you today, to say that I hope that you defer approval of this until we have some more information about that, because it does affect a lot of the residents that live out there.
Nature of the legislation that's passed, this is just the first step. Our meetings are a matter of public record, our agendas are on the website, and so, I mean, we're keenly aware that this is something of concern to various stakeholders, but the way the legislation is drafted, we have to identify what the district is before we can even learn what potential uses may come. And I could envision there would be uses that we would have very little interest in supporting, and not everything in that district is going to get anything.
I think the other thing too, just so you know, there's a process that all this, any request would come before the planning commission first. And then there would have.
No, well,
No?
it doesn't. It
What
would
if,
just
what
come
if it
to
needs
us.
to be annexed?
Well, that-
If it needs,
Yeah.
not- I think it's a little too broad to say anything
Okay.
requiring an
Most.
annexation or a change in zoning would have to go through planning and the city commission to address those issues. But a property that's already zoned appropriately for retail or recreation,
And
then
already
it would just be a
owned.
matter of doing a development agreement that would come straight to the city commission. Yes, ma'am.
And if it is a change and it does go in front of the planning commission, there's a public hearing that would come back to this body. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
There'll be a public comment period both at planning commission and the city
But
commission.
only if if it's required to go to the planning commission.
Correct, sir.
Thank you very much. All right. Ms. Govette?
I was going to speak. When you have 30 seconds left, I'll just raise my hand, so I'm not waving at you. I'm
Okay,
just
you're
giving
just
you,
saying hi?
I'm just
Okay.
giving you a warning.
All right, I'm Lynn Gavette, and my address is 602 Hoover Street, and thank you for the clarification on the decision process that you are trying to attempt with this first step. My thoughts are, I want to address sustainability. There's two recent editions in the Johnson City Press that quoted Mayor Brock talking about sustainability. The first was her address during the creation of the Johnson City Time Capsule, which hopes that we will pass on sustainable future to generations to follow. The second was the meeting between the mayors of Johnson City, Bristol, and Kingsport to create a regional plan to address climate actions we need to take. We live in a rich, biodiverse region that seems endless with its bounty of forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife habitat. And I strongly urge, as you go forward, that the developers in the city undertake environmental impact studies as well as economic. And as Mr. Peterson said, if you're still farming, you can still farm, which makes me feel good, because the way it sort of looks like this, it's like, whew, giant shopping mall. The other thing I wondered about was the tourism part of this. So I looked on tnvacation.com, which is kind of a gathering place and an advertising place for what to do in Tennessee. You can plan your vacation. But they don't break out the numbers, except in Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, and Chattanooga. So I wondered if they're valid benchmarks for us in this county to proceed with this project. We don't know what finances we receive currently from, and how many visits, and where did these people come, and do they come back? I noticed that the only advertisement we have for this part of the area is Gray Fossil Site in Greenville. So I'm sure that tourism dollars would be good for this area, and we have lots of things to offer that already exist. So my concern is that they're not duplicated, and I've heard you address that we don't want to like pick up, Sears and move it out to there, because it'd be a better, newer thing. So my request is also that somehow this gets deferred for more discussion with the community at large, because in the first reading of it, I was like, what? Why would we do this? We have these things already. So that's it.
Appreciate it. I might also add, there's significant tourist data if you will go to the chamber website.
Okay.
The Convention and Visitors Bureau has significant, and the state actually generates all the tourism data. I don't know why you didn't find it in
Yeah.
what you look for, but it's pretty significant, and
It's the
it,
number 2 industry in the state.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Whitfield.
Dr. Whitfield, Benjamin Whitfield, 717 West Pine Street. Thank you, Commissioners and Mayor and City Manager, for giving me a moment to speak regarding my concerns on the Boones Creek project. In rehearsal, my wife has timed my comments at 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Double checking on that.
I'm not going to audit her numbers. I think she's probably
Very
got it.
smart.
Yeah.
Commissioners, I've spoken with several of you and heard mention your own reservations regarding this project. Here are mine. First, I understand that tonight's reading is only for the boundaries of the Regional Retail and Tourism Development District. However, it's also my understanding that this may be the only vote on this project. Therefore, tonight's reading and approval of this boundaries carries far greater weight than the simple outlines on the map. While I know we did not ask for this district, this is probably our greatest opportunity to exercise some control over it. Secondly, this district has the potential to critically injure our mall, our downtown, and could jeopardize our Walnut Street project, which we're currently pouring millions of dollars into. The question could be asked, why are we endorsing a tax incentive for businesses to literally move as far away as possible from the city center where we have no ready infrastructure? And are we assuming that the 5% tax incentive that the states share with us and our increased tax base are going to pay for the water, the sewage, the roads, and the police and fire protection that this development will require? Will it also pay for the lost taxes that we will probably incur when businesses at the mall and downtown have to shutter? Why has there been no economic impact study to also examine what the true cost of this project will be and how it will affect our entire city? And third and lastly, up to this point, I'm not aware of any community involvement or local neighborhood meetings to listen to the members of Boones Creek or Greater Johnson City. The only public opportunity has been these city council readings that I'm afraid have been largely unnoticed due to the holidays. In closing, when the city council decided in 1970 to build the mall that helped to devastate our downtown, they did not have the benefit of the hindsight that you all have today. Therefore, given the reservations that many of us share, the lack of an economic impact study, and the limited community involvement, I'm respectfully requesting a motion to defer further readings of this ordinance until a citywide economic impact study can be produced and we can provide the public with an adequate opportunity to make their voices heard. Thank you for your service, all of you, and thank you for your time.
Dr. Whitfield? Thank you. I think you got it even sooner. Yeah,
Not going to question her numbers.
thank you. Okay, Ms. Jones.
Evening, Jody Jones, 315 West Locust Street. Thanks for the opportunity to make a couple of comments. Dr. Whitfield stole all of my ideas, and I won't repeat, but I did immediately feel some concern about this district. Right out of the gate, months ago, started speaking with folks in my community, started speaking with people that I work with, esteemed colleagues on various boards and county staff, et cetera. I did hear many people voice the concerns that you heard Dr. Whitfield mention, in particular concerns about the economic viability of the project and its impact on our downtown and our mall. I heard a myriad of other concerns as well. I want to make sure and say, though, that I also heard many positive comments about the district's possibility. In fairness, there are many that are interested in retail and entertainment opportunities outside of our city center, and I think it's worth a look. I've heard good things about the reputation and potential of some of the developers who have been named. I appreciate that we have local developers that are interested in the project. And I will say that in speaking with county staff, there do not seem to be a lot of concerns about the boundaries impact on county planning or infrastructure. So I feel good about the specific question at stake tonight, except that I would say there is so much pressure in this region when there's a project with potential economic impact to make a decision the affirmative. And it's very hard to find a place to call a timeout and do a deep dive. And my fellow county commissioners would laugh if I said, this calls for a workshop. But I do wonder if there is a time when you could take a deep dive, and if that time is now. I do agree that an economic study, market studies, would be helpful. I think it would be very interesting to learn what kinds of outside-the-box approaches have been taken. I would find it very interesting to discuss how this development might be coordinated with the go all out, as in outdoors, concept. And I feel like without putting, without stopping progress, for lack of a better word, there can be a vision for development out there, not just within these boundaries, but in the Boones Creek area broadly, where it's very hard as a decision maker to know what goes where. There's no vision, kind of like Walnut Street, for what the spirit of that area should be. And so I do feel like the ask of a deeper dive, a bit more deliberative process, and engaging the public is important, and that's all. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. Okay.
Nathan, I think, was next.
Mr. Brand, come on up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Nathan Brand, 417 West Pine Street. As the Chairman of the Historic Zoning Commission, I deeply appreciate the need for speed bumps in processes like these. And upon watching the tape of the first reading of this ordinance, I'm afraid that I don't see any of those speed bumps here. The structure of our government leads us to necessitate that we as citizens have the opportunity to give input. Walnut Street is a prime example of this mandate. As a business owner on Walnut Street, I've enjoyed seeing the depth of consideration and time that each of you and city staff have put in. I've been an active part of those meetings and have been very appreciative of the decisions that have come out of them. And I'm honestly stunned that we're not having those meetings about this 938-acre proposed development zone. Where is the buy-in from stakeholders and citizens? Where is the economic viability study, the economic impact study, the environmental impact study? The dichotomy between the Walnut Street and Boones Creek developments is great. And it should be of grave concern to all citizens that we would enter into an agreement like this simply because the state has come down and said that we should. This is not a statewide program. This is not a statewide ordinance. These state House and Senate bills are tailor-made for this exact location. So to me, that raises a lot of alarm bells. And I think that there should be no doubt to anyone watching this that this development is being specifically designed based on the pinnacle-style development that we've all heard about and whose drawings we've seen in the paper. This is the reason for this development, in my opinion. As a citizen, that's what it feels like. And when it feels like that, as a citizen, I think it's important that we, as a city, take a step back and discuss it more publicly. I guess my final comment would be, there's a burden of proof that the city must meet that this is in our citizens' best interests. And I would argue that that burden has not been lifted. And therefore, I would echo my colleagues and fellow citizens' comments that we should defer this until we can, as a group, as a city, come to a better place about this, because I'm gravely concerned. And appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Fran? Mr. Peterson, just a quick question. What's within the circle right now? How much of the property is in the city limits?
Have you got a map with that layer? And I would like to clarify one thing. There is absolutely no need for water and sewer work out there. There's
There.
a significant transmission line for water and sewer there. That won't be an issue. And further, as I pointed out earlier, the incentive coming from the state can be spent by us to make whatever infrastructure upgrades may be necessitated by this district. So I don't anticipate any infrastructure costs being incurred by the city as a result of this district. There'll be cash flow from the state to take care of all that, and if there should be some come up. We've had long and multiple conversations about business relocation and the impact on other areas. This is not going to be an easy project or projects to do. Me personally, you won't see 950 acres built out in retail and recreation out there. If you see 200 or 300 built, that's going to be a really good lick for us. But you don't know what properties may be the ones that get developed, and you get to declare the zone one time. If you declare the wrong zone, you've missed the boat forever. So it's in everyone who lives in Washington County's best interest to make that zone as big and all-encompassing as possible, so that as people come forward with development proposals, they have the opportunity for that incentive. But I can assure you, all 950 acres will not get developed. There's not that much demand for retail and recreation, and probably won't be for another 50 to 75 years. I mean, it's just not there. If it was there, what we're talking about would have already happened. The 100-acre site surrounding the fire station has been on the market for at least 15, maybe 20 years as a commercial site. I mean, that kind of gives you a good feel for the demand for additional retail development. And without incentivizing it, it's probably going to be really slow in occurring. So I don't think anybody should be alarmed that you're going to see 950 acres of retail out there. It isn't going to happen in our lifetime, probably our children's lifetimes. But it's going to take some real work for us to work with developers to incentivize development. For all the sales tax and property tax that gets generated out there, it stays here, which allows us to delay or not make property tax increases on everybody that lives in Johnson City. It's a huge economic advantage to us to be able to work with developments like this in order to generate revenue for the city so that we can continue to do parks and trails and all the other quality of life issues that we do. Because the last thing that any of my bosses want to do is to raise taxes.
Now, was that the end of your 3 minutes? Or
I'm sorry. I just, there were several questions that came up, and I just thought, well, he was pulling up a map.
Anyway,
maybe
I
he
just
gets-
asked a real quick question, I mean,
Okay.
just for my own curiosity.
So the parcels in yellow, the underlying yellow, are in the city, and the hatched ones are outside the corporate boundaries.
Okay, so
40% county, maybe.
35, 40, yeah, 40% probably are not in the
Not
city
in
at
it.
this time. Yes.
Okay, all right, it was just a curiosity question. All
Thank
right.
you, Mayor. I didn't mean to get off.
That's
but
all
I
right,
just-
it's okay. Alex Alexander, come on up. You can ask Mr.
Bet you
Mitchell
can get
right
it pretty
there.
quick. He knows where it is.
Well, I'm Alice Alexander, and I'm here to request that you amend this map to have a bigger area here. The reason why, get my pointer on here, my husband owns this, well, it won't go on there, but my husband owns this property, Mr. Peterson knows where it is, right on the outside there of KLM Drive. It is not within the half-mile radius. I believe it's more like 0.6 is where it starts. And I want to make 2 points about that. First of all, we can legally do this. And secondly is that it is benefit to the city. The first point of it being legally available for us, if we look in the legislation here, on page 3 in subparagraph 3, there gives a loophole for if we want to make it bigger than the half-a-mile radius, that the city has to propose that in their district boundary, and that the Commissioner of Revenue can then look at that and see if that's in the best interest. What makes it in the best interest is that right now that is just a empty lot of land. We had secured a loan to put a storage facility in there and we were getting ready to break ground on that when we heard about the incentive package. Now we have talked to a couple of different, we've talked to a retail and a restaurant, which have both given us letters of intent. The storage facility would produce absolutely no sales tax revenue, and it would only have 2 employees. The 2 businesses that we're looking to put in would have about $10 million in revenue per year and have 50 to 60 part-time and full-time employees. So we are requesting that before this is approved, that it be amended to include our lots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next is Mr. Larkey.
Mark Larkey, 114 Elizabeth Avenue, Gray. I think that the city manager's done a wonderful job of highlighting all the benefits, so I don't want to be redundant, but I'd just like to begin by pointing out that we're all Johnson City, and if our community is going to grow, it can't all grow in one specific area. All of our city must grow collectively, and there are retail and experiential retail concepts unique to all the different parts of our city. And there are concepts that make perfect sense in downtown that quite honestly don't make sense in Boones Creek. And the concepts that are interested in Boones Creek are not going downtown or in an enclosed mall. The economics that certain retailers that are interested in Boones Creek require in today's environment just don't honestly work without the incentive. And Johnson City can only compete for those retailers and experiences if this is passed. We should be thrilled that our legislators and governor passed this legislation for Johnson City because obviously they're very rare. And quite honestly, when our neighboring municipalities have these tools to use and we don't, it places Johnson City in a huge disadvantage, which I think we're all aware of. And I dare say that our neighbors are thrilled that we're receiving this incentive. The new sales tax generated, the new job creation, the energy and excitement that'll be created by this district will benefit Johnson City, Washington County for many, many years. I believe history will prove that this is one of the most beneficial and productive pieces of economic legislation ever passed for Johnson City by Representative Hill, Representative Van Hess, and Senator Crow. And I just ask you, let's make this happen, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Larkey. Thank you. Next is Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Matt Wiljum, 1005 King Richard Boulevard. Many of the points have already been made, so I'll be brief, Commissioner Wise. But I think the 2 things to take away from this point are this. I hear the concerns that have been raised tonight, but I also say this: we've got the opportunity here to choose our problems, right? Either the problems of a community that is growing its ability to grow a sales tax base, or we've got the opportunity to choose a problem one shrinking. And we're in the experience business. We see developments all across the country and know that with shopping the way that it's moving now, how easily it is to do at a push of a button on your phone. Opportunities like this are not to be passed because people are looking for out-of-home retail experiences that this is going to bring, and I think it's going to certainly be a boon for our community in Boones Creek, if you'll excuse the pun. The other thing I want to say is this, is that growth is not mutually exclusive, right? When we look at communities that are in the surrounding areas that have seen significant growth, think about Asheville, you think about Greenville, they weren't isolated to just one area, but the community at large. Really, this is an opportunity for a rising tide to raise all ships. So, I think we have really a once in maybe a generation opportunity here. And to miss it, I think we would do it at our peril. I think some of the concerns that have been raised are very valid. But at the end of the day, this is good for Johnson City. This is good for Washington County. And ultimately, this will be great for our region. So I thank you for your support.
Mr. Wilson. Next is Lynn Hodge. Come on up, Lynn.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and give you my viewpoints on this project. Fortunately, I own a couple acres or so in this district. The opportunities that lie ahead for Johnson City and Washington County in voting for this are many. I know, and all of you have a fiduciary responsibility to all the taxpayers of Washington County, and I know that you've got some projects that it's going to cost millions of dollars. The school board, I think, has identified maybe half a dozen projects that they would like to see forthcoming. The reconfiguration improvements to West Walnut Street, lots of dollars spent there. And hopefully that will promote some commercial development within that district. I'm sure it will, as this will to some extent. Like Mr. Peterson said, it's not going to get developed overnight. It's going to take years to see something come of this. But any development that occurs there, it's going to have to come back before this board if it's not within the recreational purview. Zoning request, it's got to come back to this. There's another opportunity for this board to look at it, another opportunity for the folks behind me that's in opposition to this to speak at that point in time. And so I think any delay on this is more jeopardizing the possibility that you have to grow your tax base, and that's what all this is about. Is if we don't develop ways to grow this tax base, then the only other opportunity you have of servicing the debt of the city and see the growth that you want to come about is through raising taxes, property taxes. That's your property taxes, my property taxes. I would much rather see the development and see the prospects that come about here with this than I would to see the property tax increase. I know there's some folks behind me that is promoting to delay the situation, but honestly, I don't think that you need to delay the situation. Their concern mostly is over control, and that opportunity will come about if somebody. Thank you, Mr.
30
Wise.
seconds.
I honor you.
No, you have 30 seconds. That's just a warning.
Okay. Oh, it's a warning. Okay. Yeah. So I'm asking for your support in this. Like I say, the best way to hold down the property tax rate is to grow our tax base. And where's the best place to do that right now? Boones Creek Road exit off I-26. And whether it involves this project or something else on down the road, this is a hot spot in Washington County, in my opinion. And there will be some growth forthcoming here. But this just adds icing on the cake as far as some of those property owners out there, and as far as the opportunity for the city and the county. So I certainly urge your support. Thank you for your consideration and allowing me to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Thank you. Mr. Alexander.
Thank you. I wouldn't rehash anything that my wife has said already. But I'm Gary Alexander, and I live in Kingsport, and I own one parcel outside the the circle by a little bit. And I heard all the remarks tonight, and I think the support for this project is very important. A lot of people who supported the Pinnacle suffer the same controversy that downtown Bristol is not going to make it. It's going to hurt this, to hurt that. The success of the Pinnacle is evident now in downtown Bristol. It's a thriving downtown. So the progress that the Pinnacle brought to Bristol was amazing, and we hope that this progress will bring also to the rest of Johnson City, downtown and the other areas. And I hope I'll be included in it. That's the hope. I do have a couple businesses that they will produce enough sales tax, about $800,000 a year. So hopefully you will support this project, and I hope to be a part of it. Thank you.
Alexander. Is there anyone else? Yes, sir. If you'll come forward and state your name and address.
My name's Tim Carter, 116 Stonehenge Drive, Bristol, Tennessee. I wasn't planning on speaking on this subject, but I am very familiar with the subject. I worked with the city of Kingsport to draw up the original border tax retail bill. This is a golden goose for the city. I mean, it's really not a very smart decision on the state's part to do it, but the reasoning behind it that we asked for it originally was because we were at an unfair advantage versus a 5% sales tax on the Virginia side of town. You know, so all the retail was going to the Virginia side, and we needed something to level the playing field. And just an example of that, Costco's went right across the Georgia line in Chattanooga, and it killed Chattanooga, but all the people are coming from Chattanooga to shop there. So we did that, and my ex-partner, Steve Johnson, built the Pinnacle. And I just so happened to have an article from September of the Bristol paper that says that Bristol has already received $9 million in benefits from the Pinnacle the first 5 years. And of course, the first 3 years was in a building process. So it's just now getting geared up to really generate money for the city and for the community. The other thing I wanted to say is that the retail industry is on its head. I mean, there's new products coming out that are mixed-use centers, but you've got to have huge demographics. You've got to have huge incomes to be able to afford those. Very few big developments like that are being done without incentives. And to be quite honest with you, Johnson City in this area does not have the demographics and the ability to attract those tenants without the incentives. This gives us a great working tool to put in some really nice mixed-use units. I mean, you could see a Topgolf, you could see a lot of things that draw people from hours away to spend their money here in Johnson City versus spending it, you know, in Virginia or North Carolina or somewhere else. But I just want to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
But I would add that I would not delay 1 minute. I'd take it as soon as I could. I'd probably have a call meeting tomorrow for the third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Okay. Thank everyone for coming up and sticking within your time frame. You've presented some very good information. We appreciate that. I think the only, let's see, Mr. Peterson, you have one from the Alexanders. I guess you'll be following up on.
Yes, ma'am.
For them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Very good. Commissioners,
Mayor,
go ahead.
I need to point out one thing. The map on the board includes the fire station. In the previous map, the fire station was not included. So that adjustment has been made.
As far as first reading versus second reading?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What would it take to include KLM? What would we need to do to push it out that way?
We need to run that by the Department of Revenue and make sure that what their reaction's going to be. And I will do that tomorrow. You can adjust this to include that on third reading.
Within this footprint, there is a lot of stuff already built out, which there, in all likelihood, will not be any new development. So
Yes.
of what we've identified up there, is there a percentage of that you think could actually be developed with new stuff?
Can I have 3 more minutes, Vice Mayor?
I'm going to set the clock.
It's probably easier for me to show you. This stuff back up here currently doesn't have road access. The crest of the hill lies somewhere in here. The likelihood of that happening anytime soon, I wouldn't think is real good. All this that fronts on Boones Creek Road is probably really prime. This piece of property sits up on a hillside and is extremely visible. That's a real prime piece of property.
Is that the hospital's
That's the hospital, the old hospital site. That's the cemetery. That's Mitch Cox's new apartment buildings. Those aren't going anywhere. That's Bart Green Drive. All that's residential. You know, just haven't been around this for 35 years. This is probably going to develop residential. You may get something on this piece. These pieces right here have real good visibility. You might see something in there, but you've got, all this back in here, probably not. But if you don't include them, you never get the chance to go back and get a redo. So it's, as the old saying goes, it's better to have it and not need it as to need it and not have it.
And is there a sunset to the incentive at some point in time?
There is. Actually, that's a really good point that I didn't bring out. This incentive is available for 30 years or until the time that the debt on the project is fulfilled, whichever occurs first.
So at year 28, you could do a 20-year bond and extend it?
At year
or-
28, you can do a 2-year bond.
Okay.
At 30 years, the money's gone. The state incentive is over. Yes, sir.
And to what you were illustrating, I own property in the subject footprint. It's already built. It doesn't generate sales tax. It's office space. So I don't really have a conflict, but I also don't want to, I mentioned that on first reading. There's several parcels that are built with relatively new construction that aren't going to become something else.
Correct.
All right, commissioners. Do we have any other conversation? I mean, we've had a lot of people speak to us on certain topics. Is there any comment or?
I will talk for a second.
All right.
I understand concerns. Believe me, I've lived here for a long time. I have been on this for 3 years hearing about things and not wanting to raise taxes. How do we keep up with our schools? How do we do this? We're bonding schools in the county, and whether or not we're getting the money that we need is a question kind of thing. So I really don't want to raise taxes. Return on investment is one of the things that I ran on. So it's one of those things, too, that I look into very closely on what will this do for us kind of thing. So the state has given us an opportunity that I think, as he said, is worth a look at doing this. We're not doing anything tonight other than saying what area could be developed. And we're going to hear about it from here on out if anything comes into this area. Entertainment, different, I'd say companies, but different buildings that would go in, that would be opportunities for us that we don't have. That for 27 years, there's some things I wanted to come here that we have to go other places to go to, that we might actually have an opportunity to have here instead of driving to Knoxville or Asheville or some of those places. So I do think it's worth a look at doing this, and I think the state of Tennessee has given us a great opportunity. This is about the only way we're going to get a Pinnacle anywhere close to here, and I'd kind of like to not drive to the Pinnacle. I'd like to drive to Boones Creek to go do something I would like to do instead of going all the way to the Pinnacle. So looking at all those things, I'm going to go ahead and vote for it tonight, but I do understand your concerns, and thankfully, they're going to come back to us before stuff happens, so we'll be able to say yes or no in the future when things come like that. So anyway, I just wanted to explain why I'm going to vote for it tonight, and I'm not overlooking one thing that you said. So it is our concern, and you're one of the people here that I'm representing. So like I said, I don't take it lightly. So thank you for coming tonight, too.
Thank you, Commissioner Fowler. Anyone else?
You know, when you think about the death of downtowns, I don't think the malls helped it, but I don't think the malls caused it. Downtowns died for a lot of reasons. You know, yes, there was a Penny's downtown and it went to the mall, and there was a Sears and it went to the mall. But you know what? Elizabethton had those places, and it doesn't have a mall, and it doesn't have those places downtown. Downtowns went through a change, and the kinds of businesses that would potentially be attracted to whatever you call this area are not looking to infill Walnut Street, and are not looking to infill downtown. And not everybody who comes up with a scheme to take advantage of this is going to get it. Because not everybody who comes up with something is going to be able to in the same way I voted for TIFs and I voted against TIFs, not every proposal is a good option. At this point, my way of thinking about this is the legislation says we have to decide where it applies and where it doesn't, and save the question about the Alexanders. That's what we're doing. Now, once we do that, whether we ever use it becomes a question of individual properties, individual developers, what their concept is, and to your broader point, then we get to talk about it on a much more specific level. If we tried to have a conversation about all the whats and ifs and what fors that could happen on all these different parcels, it would be like nailing Jello to the wall, because, you know, some of the parcels are small and can only accommodate so many uses. Some of them are in a floodplain. Some of them already have things on them. Some of them don't have roads adequate. And so each parcel and each potential use creates so many variables that until we're talking about one proposal and one concept, it's really hard to have an intelligent conversation. And nothing about what we're doing tonight short circuits that conversation in the prospective term. That's a conversation that is yet to be had, and it will occur.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of comments. I think the Alexanders make a good case that we need to get an answer for, and I don't think we're going to get that tonight, but I think that needs to be addressed. No doubt about it, there are a lot of unknowns that can't be addressed tonight and probably won't be addressed for quite a while. I think by the nature of this project and the timing and the fact that these are property owners that are going to be making these decisions, I move to approve.
There's a motion. Do we have a?
Second.
Okay.
Pete,
Commissioner Hardy, did you have something?
Can I ask just real quick?
Sure.
Pete, while you're checking out the Alexander question there at KLM, there is a lot of prospective development. There's a lot of road frontage on Boones Creek Road from KLM to 36. And so it would be interesting to know what the state would say about, you know, between Gray Station and 36, and there between, I guess it's the strip shopping center that has the pizza place in it. Can we just ask them what their thoughts, like, how, would they let us continue down that corridor?
I would be glad to ask, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We got a motion and a second, but I think a couple of us still had some comments.
Just a
Commissioner
few
Hunt?
comments. You know, I've talked to several of y'all individually. I'd like to make sure that we clarify the difference between a project and a district. This is not a project, this is a district, much like a TIF district or the border tax district. When we talk about control, we probably have more control in this district than any of the other districts that have been isolated within this region, the Appalachian Highlands, and that, as our city manager outlined, some of the things that we're dealing with or have outlined at the state level were not in place, and were actually lessons learned from the Pinnacle as to how to protect existing business and property and whatnot. Much like a TIF district, and as I think Vice Mayor Wise mentioned earlier, there is going to be plenty of time, because this is not a project where everything's going to be implemented at one time. There are going to be different owners who will bring different projects, which this district will hopefully encourage, to which we will make a decision one way or the other as to the viability and the economic impact and the worthiness of those projects. But I think we do have some controls in there, and I do think that, much like the TIF district, I mean, if we hadn't passed that, downtown probably wouldn't have been revitalized. But because we voted and approved to have a TIF district in downtown to incentivize that, we didn't kill the mall. In much the same way that the mall didn't necessarily kill downtown, more than likely. I don't know that this has any direct correlation with existing businesses that are already in the mall or downtown, because we're talking about a different type of retail that isn't necessarily in this market right now. But with that, those are the comments I have.
Good. You said exactly what I was getting ready to say, so thank you very much. No, there were a couple of things I would like to address too. And Dr. Whitfield, you said something that, sticks with me and will with the commission as well. So we have hindsight now. And Mr. Peterson addressed it a few minutes ago. How do we create and support development so that we don't deplete our other economic zones in the city? It's really important for us to be diverse in the city. We've been spending most of our resources in the downtown area for the last 5 years, at least since I've been on the commission, in 13, a lot of it. And now we're getting ready to move over to the West Walnut Street district, and we're going to spend a lot of money there, a lot of infrastructure money. And we know that when we do that, our experience is telling us if we do the right infrastructure projects, the private sector comes along and they do the development, and that's a great partnership to have. So we need to look elsewhere in our city as well, because we have other economic zones that we need to pay some attention to as well. There's a lot of work going on at Boones Creek, no two ways about it. The intersection is going to make a huge difference out there. That property, it won't be in my lifetime, but if we do nothing and leave it as it is today, it's still going to develop. Part of it's going to develop with county zoning codes, and part of it with city zoning codes. So it will be more of a mishmash of development under those circumstances. If we identified, and to Commissioner Hunter's point is exactly right, this is just identifying it as like a TIF zone, that if you're in that property, you may be eligible for an incentive. And so, but with that go the rules that it has to be in the city, and then it will have to meet our zoning codes, and it will have to go through all the processes for development. So I think, to Ms. Gavette, your point as well, so the best chance of more sustainable, smart development is going through this process and to do it under the auspices of this incentive package that the state has come forward with. It's a, what the state has done, when it happened, we were kind of surprised. We didn't know all the aspects, and we've had to learn a lot about it. But I think that the Boones Creek area is going to take on a tone and culture of its own. It's going to become a developed area, whether we want it to or not. It's going to happen. But I think we can help kind of mold it into something everybody's going to be very, very proud of. So anyway, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Do you have any other comments?
I guess I would say to Nathan on his comment about public input, and I'm a big fan of public input and certainly invested a lot of time in that on Walnut Street. In the case of this area, we're really not talking about anything broad brush. It's mostly B4 along in there. That's part of our long-term land use, and that's been part of public input dating back. Pete, the plan we're working now dates back to what, 2020, it's 2020 now. It dates back to about 2000, 2001.
This property, that interchange has been recognized as retail development since the early 90s when I came to work here. I mean, we've recognized forever that Boones Creek is the new North Johnson City at some point in time.
So we're not deviating from sort of a concept out there. We're just trying to take advantage of a potential tool that we may or may not always use. But just to that point, it has had some vetting.
Anything else? All right, Ms. Roberts.
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Next order of business is consideration of a resolution to annex certain properties located within the 8th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, adjoining the present corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, said properties being known as the Landy Midway Annexation. To zone said properties R3 medium-density residential as described herein, and to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee accordingly, being a part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, ready for your consideration on third and final reading.
Hassan?
Has this changed in any way?
Absolutely not.
Move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise? Yes. Mayor Brock?
Yes.
We got to get a couple of these guys home before they get the rest of us sick.
And please do not say what the Tennessee Indiana report is. Dr. Calhoun will go crazy.
Next is ordinance number 4716-19, an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by assigning R3 medium-density residential zoning to certain properties within the 8th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, known as the Landy Midway Annexation, ready for your consideration on third and final reading. Nothing has changed.
Move to approve?
Motion and a second. Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes. Mr. Peterson, would you go ahead and do H? I've noticed Judge Green is here, and for her to have to sit through these
Want to stay
next
for the rest of it, though? It's
4
very
or
exciting.
5.
She wants to go watch the ball game.
Let's do that. Hang on just one second, Hassan.
Okay. We will now do move to ordinance number 4721-19. An ordinance to amend Title III, Chapter 4, Section 3-403, parentheses 2, and repeal and amend Title III, Chapter 4, Section 3-403, parentheses 6 of the Code of the City of Johnson City, Tennessee, to revise the clerk of the juvenile court, and repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, ready for your consideration on third and final reading.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes. And then H, that was G.
That was
We'll do
H. That was H.
It's related.
Well, the H
Oh.
is the resolution.
Okay, that was G, so now you're on.
Is it separate?
G and H.
Yeah, now
Yes.
you're on H.
Okay. Next is a resolution to
Yes.
establish the status and compensation of the clerk of the juvenile court of the city of Johnson City. Ready for your consideration. This is not an ordinance, but it is a resolution which establishes that this will be a part-time position to be elected at the regular August election every 4 years, beginning in August 2020. The compensation will be set by resolution of the Board of Commissioners. The juvenile court clerk shall not be an individual currently employed by the city of Johnson City, and it will be a part-time position. The compensation will be set at $12,000 annually and not be entitled to any city benefits.
To approve?
Second.
Everyone has the resolution in front of them. So there's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Does this still have to be elected position part-time?
It does.
Okay.
State law requires that to be an elected position.
Okay. All right. Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise?
Yes.
Mayor Brock?
Yes. Thank you, Judge Green.
Commissioners, item F, the petitioner has asked that that be deferred for 2 weeks. So I'm hurrying, Commissioner Calhoun.
Good. See,
I'm about to have to prop him up. He's looking a little.
going back to C.
C,
C.
a resolution to annex a portion of certain property located within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, adjoining the present boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee. Said property being known as the Chestnut Cove annexation to zone said property RP2 planned residential as described herein, and to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee accordingly, being a part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, ready for your consideration on third and final reading. Nothing has changed from your previous readings.
You
I'm
said
going to
our-
recuse myself to avoid the appearance of a conflict
Okay.
on this and the next item.
Mr. Peterson, you said RP2, it's RP3 on this summary.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, but right now we're doing the annexation, aren't we?
We're doing, no,
See?
We're doing
Resolution.
C, which is a resolution to annex the property.
And then we'll do, yeah.
okay, all right.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comments? Go ahead. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise,
Yes, abstain, sorry.
Mayor Brock.
Yes,
All
Now.
addled over here.
47, 17, 19.
Well, you guys are scrambling. Is it 2 or 3? I've got 2 everywhere except in one agenda summary.
It's RP2.
Thank you, sir.
So our summary
The
is,
summary was
is
incorrect on
incorrect.
that one. Your next order of business is ordinance number 4717-19.
Says RP2 in that.
An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by assigning RP2 planned residential zoning to certain property within the 11th Civil District of Washington County, Tennessee, known as Chestnut Cove annexation, ready for your consideration on third and final reading. There have been no changes.
Commissioners,
Move for approval.
Recuse myself.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun,
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise.
Abstain.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Next is ordinance number 4718-19. An ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, being part of the appendix to ordinance number 1519, entitled an ordinance to adopt a code of laws and ordinances for the city of Johnson City, Tennessee, and to repeal all laws and ordinances in conflict therewith and amendatory thereof by changing from B4 Arterial Business District to R4 Medium Density Residential District, a portion of certain property located at 4835 North Rome Street is ready for your consideration on third and final reading.
Any changes?
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other questions? Ms. Roberts?
Commissioner Calhoun.
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wise.
Abstain.
Mayor Brock.
Yes.
Next,
Public input.
F. I think we still have F to go.
That got pulled, right?
That was the
Oh,
third.
F got
deferred?
pulled.
Okay.
Got pulled.
Yes.
So we're at
G and H we've done.
public input.
Your public input,
Take
yes.
some Larry home to get some NyQuil.
Yeah, and then Dr. Fowler is going.
Input, yeah. I'm getting it from John over here.
Okay. Our public input a few minutes ago was primarily on the second reading of the business district. Is there anyone here who has applied to speak to the commission tonight? Okay, seeing no one, I will not open it, but I'll close it. Thank you. All right, Mr. Peterson, anything at all?
Enjoy the ball game. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Yes. Very good. Commissioners, anything, Mr.?
Go Vols.
Yeah. Well, you being late to the game may help you,
think?
in case they're not doing well, keep you from suffering.
I can fast forward.
Okay. Commissioner Hunter?
No, nothing new here.
Nothing from me.
Vice Mayor? Well, it's been a really good year. 2019 was a super duper year for Johnson City and hopefully for its citizens.
2020 hasn't been bad.
We're ready to go, so we're coming out of the chute. So, thank you, Mr. Peterson and staff, and meeting adjourned.
Thank you.